It seems like you can't escape the headlines these days about all the crazy weather.
Yeah.
And we've actually had a ton of requests to break down everything that happened in 2024.
Mm.
Like everyone's really feeling the heat, literally.
Yeah.
So let's dive into it. We've got an expert with us who can help us make sense of this record-breaking year.
Well, you're definitely right about the records. 2024 is officially the hottest year on record, beating out even 2023.
Oh, wow.
And what's even more concerning is the fact that the global average temperature actually went above that 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels,
Right.
and it stayed there for a full 12 months.
Okay, wait a minute. That 1.5 degree mark, that's the limit from the Paris Agreement to try to prevent the worst climate change outcomes, right? And we hit that for an entire year.
Yeah, that's what makes 2024 such a serious wake-up call. We may be reaching that threshold sooner than we thought.
So let's rewind a bit and look back at how this all played out. When did things really start to go off the rails?
Well, the year began with the warmest January ever recorded,
Oh, wow.
which kind of set the stage for what was to come. That led into the warmest winter on record for the entire northern hemisphere. And it wasn't just air temperature. We saw really warm oceans, too.
So we're talking record-breaking heat on land and at sea right from the start.
Yeah.
Were there any other clues early on that 2024 was going to be a wild one?
Absolutely. In June, Hurricane Beryl formed, and it quickly became a Category 5 hurricane.
Wow.
And that's the earliest we've ever seen a hurricane reach that intensity in the Atlantic.
At Category 5 in June, that's definitely not normal.
Nope. And July just cranked things up even more. On July 22nd, we had the Earth's hottest day ever recorded, a global average of 17.16 degrees Celsius.
17.16 degrees Celsius. That's definitely a number to remember. And this wasn't just like a one-day spike, right? This extreme heat was global.
You got it. In the days leading up to that, record cities in Asia, from Japan to Indonesia to China, were reporting record-breaking temperatures of their own. Even the Gulf region had a heat index over 60 degrees Celsius.
That is intense. It sounds brutal.
Yeah.
Did this trend continue throughout the whole summer?
It did. The Northern Hemisphere went through its warmest summer on record, ending with a scorching August. But it wasn't just about the heat waves. This intense heat also fueled other extreme events around the world.
Like what else were we dealing with during this time?
Well, in September, for instance, a low-pressure system named Boris hit Central Europe with tons of rain. It caused some of the worst flooding the region has seen in a long time.
Yeah, I remember seeing the images of those floods on the news. They were devastating.
Oh.
Entire neighborhoods were underwater.
Exactly. Parts of the Czech Republic, Austria, Poland, and Slovakia got 3 months' worth of rain in just 5 days. The damage was really widespread.
Wow. And if I remember correctly, those intense rains weren't limited to Europe, were they?
You're right, West Africa was also hit hard by heavy rains that same month. Countries like Nigeria and Niger, Chad, and Mali experienced their worst flooding in decades. Millions of people were affected.
It's amazing how these extreme events were happening in totally different parts of the world. But you can see this connection to a bigger pattern of extreme weather driven by climate change.
Yeah, it shows that we're all linked by our climate system. What happens in one region can definitely impact the entire globe.
So with all this going on, we have to think about the usual suspects, El Niño and greenhouse gas emissions. But it seems like even those can't fully explain how intense the warming was in 2024.
Right. While those definitely played a part, scientists are exploring other things that might have added to this unprecedented warming.
Okay, so what else could be amplifying all this heat?
Where one interesting development is related to something you might not expect: the shipping industry. Back in 2020, the International Maritime Organization, or IMO, set rules to cut down on sulfur in shipping fuel. This was a good thing for reducing air pollution, but it seems to have had an unexpected side effect.
Wait, so how could cleaner shipping fuel actually lead to warmer temperatures?
It has to do with something called planetary albedo. Albedo is basically how much solar radiation is reflected back into space by the Earth's lighter surfaces like ice and clouds reflect more sunlight. Darker surfaces like oceans and forests absorb more.
Got it. So how does the IMO regulation tie into albedo?
So burning fossil fuels, including that old shipping fuel, released tiny particles called aerosols into the atmosphere.
Okay.
These aerosols actually reflect sunlight back into space, increasing the planet's albedo. So when the IMO rules led to fewer aerosols, it looks like less solar radiation got reflected back, which means more warming.
So cleaner shifts might actually be contributing to a warmer planet. That's an interesting trade-off.
It is. It shows how complex and interconnected the Earth's systems really are. But there's another factor that could be even more important when it comes to albedo cloud cover.
Right, clouds, those massive planetary sunshades. What's happening with them?
Scientists have noticed a decrease in total cloud cover over the past few decades, especially low-level clouds over the North Atlantic. This decrease is probably connected to rising ocean surface temperatures.
So warmer oceans, fewer clouds, less reflection, more warming.
Precisely. It creates a bit of a vicious cycle. Warming leads to fewer clouds, which leads to even more warming. This could be especially important over the North Atlantic, where ocean temperatures have been rising rapidly.
It's like we're putting together a climate change puzzle, uncovering all these interconnected factors that contribute to these unprecedented heat waves.
It's a complex puzzle, for sure. And we can't forget that all these rising temperatures and extreme weather events directly impact people's lives.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the science, but we can't ignore the human cost of climate change.
You're right. And we saw that play out in 2024. The floods in Europe and West Africa displaced millions and caused thousands of deaths. And there was that terrible heat wave in Saudi Arabia during the Hajj pilgrimage in June that killed over 1,300 people.
It's just heartbreaking to think about all the suffering these events cause. It really hits home that climate change isn't some abstract idea. It's a real and present danger.
It is. And it's danger that's only going to get worse if we don't do something. Organizations like World Weather Attribution are doing important work. They analyze these extreme weather events and figure out how much of it is due to human-caused climate change.
Right.
And what they're finding consistently shows a clear link.
So it's not just a coincidence that we're seeing more and more of these extreme events. They're a direct result of our actions.
Exactly. And the science is clear. Every bit of warming matters. The more the planet heats up, the more severe and frequent these events will be.
That's a sobering thought. But with all these alarming events, were there any signs of hope in 2024? Did we see any progress in tackling this crisis?
There were some positive things happening on the international scene despite all the bad news.
Right.
The UN Climate Conference, COP29, focused on giving more financial support to poorer countries
Okay.
to help them deal with the impacts of climate change.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Those countries often don't have the resources to adapt to and recover from these disasters, even though they've contributed the least to historical carbon emissions.
Exactly. And in response to the UN Secretary General's call to action on extreme heat, a bunch of experts from different organizations and countries got together to develop a plan to address the growing problem of heat waves.
Okay.
So there's definitely growing awareness of the need to act urgently.
That's good to hear. But it still feels like we're racing against time. What does 2024's record-breaking heat tell us about the future? Are we even close to meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement?
Well, the fact that we went over 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming for 12 months straight is a big warning sign. It suggests we might be hitting that point much sooner than we thought.
And going over that limit, even temporarily, has serious consequences, right?
Absolutely. The effects of climate change aren't linear. Every little bit of warming makes more severe and frequent extreme weather events more likely.
So we're already feeling the impacts, and they're only going to get worse unless we change course. But this isn't just about the next few years, is it? We need to be thinking long-term.
You're absolutely right. We need to look at the big picture and consider the kind of world we're leaving for future generations.
It's a legacy that we all have a responsibility to shape.
That's the key. The choices we make today will have effects for decades, even centuries to come.
So as we move into 2025, what's the most important takeaway for our listeners? What should we all keep in mind as we navigate this changing world?
I think 2024 showed us more than ever that climate change isn't some far-off threat. It's happening right now, and it's impacting us all. But the good news is we still have time to act.
We can still make a difference. It's not too late.
Exactly. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the resources to transition to a more sustainable future. We just need the political will and collective action to make it happen.
It's a call to action.
Absolutely. 2025 could be a turning point. It's been designated as the International Year of Glaciers Preservation, which will hopefully shine a light on the cryosphere, the Earth's frozen regions.
Right.
They play a crucial role in regulating our climate.
Protecting our glaciers is so important for a stable climate future.
It is. And the World Meteorological Organization is also working on things to improve how we monitor greenhouse gases and develop early warning systems for extreme weather to protect vulnerable communities.
So there's a lot of work being done to understand and deal with climate change. But in the end, it also comes down to individual action, right?
It does. Every choice we make, from the food we eat to how we travel to the products we buy, has an impact on the planet.
So we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future. It's not just about governments and big corporations. It's about each of us making conscious choices in our daily lives.
Yes. And it's about demanding action from our leaders, making sure they keep their climate promises.
It's about using our voices and our votes to create the world we want to live in. It's about recognizing that our individual actions, when multiplied by millions, can really make a difference. It really shows that we have the power to shape the future of this planet.
Yeah, that's where the real hope lies, in our ability to make a difference.
So as we wrap up our look at this incredibly hot year, 2024, what's the main message you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think 2024 made one thing crystal clear. The effects of climate change aren't off in the future anymore. They're happening now, and they're affecting all of us. But the good news is, we still have time to change things. We have the solutions. We just need everyone to work together and put them into action.
2024 was certainly a wake-up call with all those record-breaking temperatures and extreme weather events. It's a warning of what could happen if we keep going down the same path. But it also showed how resilient people are and our ability to create positive change.
Absolutely. If we want a safer and more sustainable world for the future, we have to act now, both on our own and together.
So let's make 2025 the year we turn the tide on climate change. And for anyone listening who wants to stay informed on the latest weather and climate news, be sure to follow meteorologist Rob Jones.
You can find him on Instagram @meteorologist, on TikTok @tvmeteorologist, and on YouTube, just search for Rob Jones Hurricane. You'll also find the Meteorology Matters podcast playlist there.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Meteorology Matters. We'll see you next time. Stay informed, stay involved, and stay hopeful.